Welcome back to another episode of Multifamily AP 360, and our guest is Owen Barrett from Shine. So, welcome, Owen. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you very much. Share a little bit more about yourself, Owen.
My current company, Shine, focuses on helping multifamily owners install solar to increase cash flow and value. We got to this business model after acquiring 650 units ourselves and installing solar on our own portfolio. So I like to think that kind of within the solar contracting world, we're the best ones at taking the perspective of owners and operators.
Awesome. Share me a little bit more about your background before coming into solar side and what sparked your passion towards solar side.
Yeah, so originally went to school for finance. I got a degree in finance, worked in the financial industry for a few years. I'm an Excel nerd. I love working in Excel, but I didn't like the finance industry, so I wanted to shift gears. So I went to grad school for environmental science at UC Santa Barbara. That was in 2012. That launched me into a career as a corporate energy manager. So I was working for a Fortune 500 company, got to help them implement every kind of clean technology that made sense. So fuel cells, solar, LED technology, HVAC optimization, and really enjoyed it because I was using sort of financial analysis to justify environmental projects. But I always had the bug to try something myself and start my own company. So I started a niche energy services company for rural school districts in 2015. That exploded. We worked with, I think, 40 school districts in about 18 months. I sold that company, and then that's ultimately what got me investing in multifamily real estate originally as an LP. And then I found this kind of desire to want to try and decarbonize multifamily, and it was really hard to do from the LP side. So that's when I started buying assets myself as a GP and implementing the decarbonization strategy as part of the value add strategy.
You're absolutely. And so, share me a little bit more about the impact that created.
Yeah, for school districts, it's incredibly impactful. Any dollar you can save on energy, in theory, goes to books, computers, teachers' salaries. So I feel like energy projects within school districts, public school districts, are super important. The frustrating part of working with school districts is they tend to get in their own way. They have boards of directors that are generally pretty uneducated parents most of the time. And so you have these boards that hold up these projects for really crazy reasons. And after a couple of years of experiencing that, I had to shift gears because it was too frustrating.
Got it. And you implemented 60 millions of clean technology. So what were some of the biggest wins from that experience?
Yeah, some of the biggest were the fuel cells that we implemented for a life sciences company. So fuel cells are really interesting. They generate electricity from natural gas, which is generally cleaner than the grid. They also provide emergency backup, so like a generator. So we got a big environmental win from the emissions side, emergency backup for a life sciences company that has millions of dollars of inventory that's needs to be kept at a certain temperature is really exciting too. So at the time, it was cutting edge technology. That was I think 2012, 2013. Today, fuel cells are more widely available and implemented, but it was cool to be implementing something that was on the cutting edge at the time.
Sure. So you have acquired and partially decarbonized 96 millions of multifamily real estate. So what exactly that process looks like?
Yeah, decarbonizing multifamily is challenging, right? Because you have the split incentive problem. So the owners are on the hook for paying for these upgrades, and generally the tenants benefit. Windows is a great example. Double windows help energy bills for tenants, but owners have to pay an exorbitant amount of money to replace all the windows. So a lot of times you'll see 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s vintage property with original windows, and it's because of this split incentive problem. The same thing is true for lighting, for HVAC. It's really hard to justify these CapEx projects from the owner's perspective because the benefit goes to the tenants. Solar is different though. Solar, you can divert the benefit of energy created from on-site solar back to owners, which then helps them justify the CapEx project from the beginning. So we've focused on solar as the main decarbonization strategy because it's really the only one that's accretive to project level returns.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, like we can compare and contrast windows, right? Windows may cost, I don't know, $1 million to upgrade all the windows on a 200 unit property. and the tenant will save energy as a result, but there's no NOI to the owner because it's just going to the tenant. Solar, on the other hand, if you install, say, a 200 unit property, you install 200 small solar systems that are interconnected into tenant units. Those tenants may save $50 a month in electricity. Because you can monitor exactly how much electricity is going to the tenant, you can send the tenant a bill for that electricity. So now the owner is generating $50 in NOI per month from tenants from solar, and that helps justify the $1 million that it may cost to install solar in the first place.
Yeah, thank you for explaining that. So from owner's point of view, how exactly they need to decide whether they need to go for solar project? How do you calculate like return on investment for a period? And
So the return for solar is generally impacted by the cost of electricity. I think what a lot of owners don't understand now is that over the last 4 years, I mean, they see this on their operating expenses, utilities have skyrocketed. That's the same for tenants. So now in Texas, for instance, the cost of electricity for a tenant is almost as expensive as it is in California, which most people don't know. So cost of electricity is the main driver. So what we'll do is we'll design a system, a solar system, to see how much solar you can fit on the roof. We'll see how much electricity that will generate. We'll see what the cost of electricity is to the tenants. And if you multiply the amount of electricity produced by the cost of electricity, that's the NOI that could be generated via solar income. So we'll do all the analysis up front to show an owner either what the cash on cash return is, the IRR, like whatever financial metric they're going after, we can help them figure it out.
Sure.
So what we see generally is about a 17% IRR over a 10-year hold. Usually it's like a 10 to 11% cash on cash return from year one.
Yeah,
So for a lot of value add GPs, it's really accretive because they're generally not getting 10, 11% cash on cash, especially now. So what we've seen is that in most states, solar is incredibly accretive to real estate deals. It's just not something that owners, operators, GPs are really thinking about in their due diligence, but that's something that we hope we can help change.
so what is the minimum size of apartments or like multifamilies you look for to implement this kind of projects?
We generally don't go much lower than 100 units. Garden style is the best kind of use case just because you have the most roof space relative to how many apartment units there are. It can work on mid-rise too, but if you start looking at like high rise, it's harder to implement unless you have a lot of surface level parking because you need somewhere for the solar panels to go.
Sure. So can we implement solar in all 50 states or is there any restrictions? Which states are better than other states?
Yeah, you can do all 50 states. The only state that I've analyzed to date that it's just the economics are not really that compelling to move forward is Kansas. A lot of the Midwest from Minnesota to Arkansas, the economics are not great. But in the Southeast, the Southwest, and the Northeast, you're looking at 15 to 17% IRR over a 10-year hold, which usually does add 1 to 2 percentage points to the project level IRR.
Yeah. So what are the challenges of implementing solar projects into multifamily space?
I think it's just new. I think I like to think about it like bulk internet or bulk cable. That
Mhm.
was new maybe 5 to 10 years ago, and now it's pretty common.
Yeah.
Most owners and operators are not used to thinking about solar. If they are, then they usually only think about it through like the common area meter lens. So, what's our operating expense and what can we reduce with solar? The challenge there is that the numbers just aren't really big enough to make much of a difference to the project.
Yeah.
If you change your mentality from eliminating common area usage to offsetting tenant usage, the numbers are like 10x. And now all of a sudden you can have a real impact on the overall investment instead of just a small one.
Sure. Absolutely. And can you also share us the process, how long it will take to implement this solar projects?
Yeah, that's definitely dependent on where it's located. More liberal places like California and New England take a longer time just because the permitting process is more bureaucratic.
Yeah.
But generally, it takes us 4 to 6 weeks to get a set of plans drawn. Permitting can take anywhere from a month to 3 months, potentially longer if you're in places like California. And then the actual installation, like the time that we're on site installing solar, is about 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay.
So all said and done, it's anywhere from, let's say, 4 to 6 months. But the time that we're on site with a physical presence is only 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay, sure. So typically, whatever you said is for generally 100 plus units, right?
Yeah, 100 plus units is what we shoot for just because we've just made a business decision not to go after smaller properties.
Yeah, yeah, sure. So would you share any best experiences implementing solar projects?
Yeah, I think it's just really, we've done a few projects now. We're working on a couple projects with some publicly traded multifamily REITs now, which we're really excited about. But it's just this idea that you can now install solar on tenant meters and have a huge impact on your project level returns. I think that's so exciting because rates are coming down now. Rates are still higher than what they used to be. Property taxes are higher than what they used to be. Expenses are generally higher than what they used to be. So our what we're seeing is that it's hard for sponsors and owners to get projects to pencil to the point where they can make the acquisition. So having this tool in your tool belt, if you will, is another way to get returns to where they need to be to justify the acquisition in the first place. So it's been really exciting for us to talk with owners and operators about plugging solar into the due diligence so that they can see the effect on the project level returns before they close a deal so that it helps them be able to make the acquisition in the first place.
Sure. Yeah. So would you also share any challenging experience in implementing solar projects?
Yeah, I think anytime, and this is not for solar, this is for anything, but anytime you're going after a low bid, like low price, you're going to have issues with quality. We've been pressed by a couple owners to trim the price. And ultimately, all that means is we're using lower quality components. Those lower quality components have worse warranties, they have higher failure. So I think it's just important to evaluate solar proposals from something beyond price, like price and lifetime value. And that's harder to do, but at the end of the day, you get what you pay for. So if you pay the lowest price, you're going to get the lowest quality generally.
Yeah, yeah, got it. So what are some biggest myths about clean energy and decarbonization?
I think the biggest one is that it just costs money. It doesn't add any value. I would argue that solar in today's environment right now is one of the most valuable things you can do to your property. People like to think about how much more rent can you get if you upgrade your cabinets to granite or you do a different paint scheme or you add a dog park or a pool. But I think just training yourself to think through this is a value add strategy that nobody is doing. Nobody has implemented this yet. I think it's just fighting that misconception that solar only costs money and it doesn't add value. That's got to be the biggest misconception in the multifamily industry right now, or that it doesn't work in certain states because the cost of electricity is not high enough. Cost of electricity has skyrocketed since COVID, and that's really helped the financial returns of solar.
Yeah, sure. So where do you see solar industry in multifamily space in next few years?
I would like to see it become one of the most widely adopted value add strategies of owners. I understand people are on the fence about whether or not climate change is real. I know climate change is like a heavily politicized topic, but just from a financial perspective, it makes sense more times than it doesn't. So I'd like people to relax on the climate denial and just think about it from a dollars perspective, because I think then it will help get adopted more.
Sure, great. How much it will cost for implementing solar project on 100 plus units?
Yes. So I'll just do it on a per unit basis. It costs about $6,000 per unit. It generates about $650 per year in NOI.
Yeah,
I think what's really exciting is, at least right now, and this could change in the future with the new administration, but solar is eligible for a 30 to 50% tax credit. So let's say it's a 50% tax credit of that $6,000 install cost. You get a tax credit worth $3,000. And now we can sell that tax credit for cash. And that's a big difference because a lot of multifamily groups and owners have so much depreciation that tax credit is, they're not really that valuable. But if you can sell the tax credit for cash, and then you can use that cash to either pay down a solar loan or just reduce the system cost from the first place, it really helps the financials. So again, that could change with the new administration, but right now it's a really big advantage to commercial real estate owners.
sure. So would you also elaborate a little bit more about tax, not only tax credit, there are a few other credits also you'll get, right, as a operator if location is an opportunity zone or some other green location or something like that. Could you share that?
Yeah, so every project has a base 30% tax credit. If the contractor installs a system that has a certain percentage of components manufactured in the US, it qualifies for something called domestic content, and that's another 10%. So now you're at a 40% credit. And then if the project is located in what's called an energy community, you get another 10%. That's how you get to the 50%. So it does depend where the project's located and what components are being installed. In most of Texas is an energy community. So Texas is one of our favorite markets because we see a lot of 50% tax credits there.
Nice. Which markets you are targeting at this point?
The cool thing about our model is it works nationwide. So we really like Texas just because it has high solar irradiance. So you get a lot of electricity produced per solar panel installed, and 50% tax credits help the economics. But what's been really interesting is we'll start with one project in Texas, and then that owner owns in Florida, in Arizona, in Colorado. And so we've been able to follow their portfolio after doing a first project with them. So we're agnostic to where projects are located. We have the ability to install nationwide. And so it's been cool to follow the portfolio of certain owners.
So your company uses domestic components or foreign components?
Right now, there's not any domestically produced modules or panels that are cost effective. That's changing, but it's probably 2 years out. We get to domestic content through inverters and racking, so the component that the panels are attached to. So we use enough components that we qualify for domestic content. We would love to start using modules that are manufactured in the US. If we tell an owner, you can get a project installed for $1 million if you use Chinese panels, or $1.2 million if you use American panels, we have not found an owner that's willing to pay that premium for US made panels
Yeah,
yet.
absolutely. What is your biggest project so far?
We are doing about a megawatt in Colorado. So it's about a $2.5 million project. I think it's on a 300-ish unit property. So that's our biggest one to date, but we have a couple in the pipeline that are closer to 3 million. So it's really just it's a result of how many units you have. If you're doing a garden style installation, it's 400 units versus 300. It's going to be 25% more expensive.
So are they new development projects or existing projects?
To date, we've only done existing. There's a massive advantage for development if you're talking about affordable deals like LIHTC specifically. If you include, I don't know if any of your listeners are in the LIHTC space, but if you include the cost of solar into your development project for LIHTC, you can include it into the basis of the project,
Yeah,
which means you get the low income tax credits for the cost of solar, and you also get the tax credits, the federal tax credits of solar. We haven't done any projects to date. We're working on a couple, but they're not finished. But affordable owners can get 80 to 105% of the cost of solar paid for through the combination of tax credits, which is really exciting.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. So
Yeah.
would you share what's your Shine company's goals for next few years? Where you guys,
Yeah, we're trying to double growth every year. So this year we'll probably install on 1,500 units, 3,000 units, and 6,000 and 12,000. But we're just trying to install on as many units as we can because we're very much a mission-driven company. So we're excited by the environmental impact that we have. At the same time, we understand that the multifamily industry is not always that driven by environmental impact, which is fine. Because I think if we do our job explaining the value prop from an NOI perspective, we're all aligned. You get the environmental impact, you get the NOI impact, and it just helps everybody adopt solar faster.
yeah, absolutely. Let's shift towards any habits that are helping you to be successful.
No screens before bedtime has helped improve sleep. I think another one too, but I only allow myself to have meetings for 3 hours a day because I found that when I had my schedule wide open for meetings, I was just in 7 to 8 hours of meetings a day and I wasn't actually getting any work done. Narrowing the window that I'm available for meetings and then by default having more time to actually do the work that needs to be done has had a pretty profound effect on my schedule and my life.
Sure, absolutely. Share me any one personal learning that impacted you personally and from business point of view also.
I was trying to start a company probably 10 years ago, and it was like a side hustle. I had a corporate job full time, and I was trying to start this on the side. At the time, I was living in San Diego, and I was part of like a angel investor network. And I was pitching an angel investor, and he asked what I was doing to pay for a living, and I told him that I had a job, and he said, I'll never invest in a part-time entrepreneur. And a week later, I quit my job. And he still didn't invest in the company, but it was just a huge, yeah, I really needed to hear that because since then, there's been that book written, Burn the Boat, which is like a similar mentality. It's hard for people to believe in you as an entrepreneur if you're not all in.
Yeah,
So I think that was just something I needed to hear at the time.
sure, sure, absolutely. And any books that impacted you?
Man, I think there's it's one, it's kind of corny. It's called Start Something That Matters by the guy that started Tom Shoe's company. And I just think there's so much that has to happen when you start a company. But I think just instilling some kind of impact in your company, it doesn't need to be environmental, it could be anything. I think if you do it from day one, it's a lot easier than trying to start having an impact down the road because if you do it from the beginning, you're used to the effect that it may have on your P&L. But if you try and do it down the road, once you're already generating revenue or profitable, and it seems like you're losing money potentially for that impact. And so I've always just tried to instill impact into our companies from day one, and it's had a lot of success.
And how can listeners connect with you, Owen?
So our website is getshine.com. And then the only social media platform that I'm on is LinkedIn. So just Owen Barrett on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Owen.